Welcome, my students. Today we will cover lesson number 19.5 that cover the diversity of fungi. Our objectives are: by the end of this lesson, you should be able to illustrate the characteristics of fungi, describe how fungi obtain nutrients, identify the four main types of fungi, summarize the life cycles of cloth fungus and bread mold. Regarding the outline of today's lesson, we will talk about the characteristics of fungi, then the structure of the fungi, then the different types of fungi, and eventually the life cycles of fungi. Even in the characteristics, we will go to the main.
Fungi come in a wide assortment of shapes, sizes, and colors. Mushrooms, mold, and the yeast used to make breads and cheese are all types of fungi. Fungi are heterotrophic consumers. This means that they obtain energy by breaking down molecules from their environment. The fungus growing on this orange uses the nutrients in the orange for its energy. Fungi are made of long, slender filaments called hyphae. The hyphae are wound together into a twisted mass called a mycelium, which forms the fungus's body. The cell walls of fungi contain chitin. Chitin is a tough sugar molecule also found in the exoskeletons of insects. Fungi undergo nuclear mitosis. Spindle fibers drag chromosomes to opposite poles within the nucleus rather than opposite poles of the cell. The nucleus then divides, causing the cell to have more than one nucleus. The cell itself may then undergo mitosis, the nuclear envelope remaining intact from prophase to anaphase.
Then we will back to the structure of the fungi.
Multicellular fungi are made up of long chains.
And we will go for the different sorts and types of fungi as well.
Fungi are classified according to their shape and the way that they reproduce.
Zygomakota, Ascomycota, Zygomakota, and Reproduction. Then we will eventually talk about the life cycle
In
of the fungi regarding the sexual and asexual reproduction in the Zygomakota and in Zygomakota as well. So if we back, we will start our illustrations. In our explanation, we will talk about the characteristics of fungi. So, the characteristics of fungi are adapted to absorb their food from the environment. The fungal cell walls are made of chitin. Fungi do not have chlorophyll, so that they cannot perform photosynthesis, so they cannot depend on their own selves in order to make their own food. So they are heterotroph. They are not autotroph because they cannot make their own food by themselves, because they cannot photosynthesize due to the lack of the chlorophyll. Fungi absorbs through the hyphae. They are absorbing through their hyphae. How they are doing this? Fungi are digesting extracellularly. They are secreting enzymes extracellularly outside of their cells on the substrate, so they are breaking down the large water-insoluble substances into smaller water-soluble substances so that they can absorb them easily through the hyphae. Fungi are adapted to absorb the food from the environment by the same way I just mentioned. Fungal cell walls, yes, are also made up of chitin, and also they can absorb food through their hyphae.
Fungi come in a wide assortment of shapes, sizes.
Now we will go for the characteristics of fungi, and this is the different shapes that may be found in the fungi.
And colors. Mushrooms, mold, and the yeast used to make breads and cheese are all types of fungi. Fungi are heterotrophic consumers. This means that they obtain energy by breaking down molecules from their environment. The fungus growing on this orange uses the nutrients in the orange for its energy. Fungi are made of long, slender filaments called hyphae. The hyphae are wound together into a twisted mass called a mycelium, which forms the fungus's body. The cell walls of fungi contain chitin. Chitin is a tough sugar molecule also found in the exoskeletons of insects. Fungi undergo nuclear mitosis. Spindle fibers drag chromosomes to opposite poles within the nucleus rather than opposite poles of the cell. The nucleus then divides, causing the cell to have more than one nucleus. The cell itself may then undergo mitosis, the nuclear envelope remaining intact from prophase to anaphase.
If we're back to the explanation, we finished the characteristics of fungi. Now we'll go to study the structure of the fungi, and in the beginning we would like to see and watch together this video.
Multicellular fungi are made up of long chains of cells called hyphae. Some hyphae are divided by cross-sections called septa. Other hyphae do not have septa dividing their cells. In hyphae, the cytoplasm can flow freely from one cell to the next. Hyphae grow into bundles called mycelia. Mycelia can be made up of many meters of hyphae. Mycelia have a very high surface area to volume ratio, which makes fungi well suited for absorbing nutrients.
This is the structure of the fungi, and we can look in here for the body structure of fungi. The fungi are multicellular organisms. Multicellular means they are made up of more than one cell, with the exception of yeast, because this is the only unicellular fungi. Uni means one, cellular means cell. So only yeast is considered the unicellular fungi that is made up of only one single cell. Firstly, we have the hyphae, those thread-like structures. The bodies of multicellular fungi are made up of long strands that are known as hyphae. Those are the hyphae. Then we have the mycelium, is an underground network of hyphae. Underground network of hyphae. This is the mycelium. And then we have the fruiting body. We have the fruiting body, is a reproductive structure of a fungus that grows above the ground. Mushroom are one type of the fruiting body. This is the fruiting body, the part of the fungus that is grows above the ground. And if we are looking here, there are septate or septa or divisions through which or between which the spores are there. And here you can find that the spore producing structures or the basidia specifically for the mushroom that will come later. Now we studied the structure of the fungi. If you go to study the different types of fungi, we will see that
fungi are classified according to their shape and the way that they reproduce. The thread-like fungi, members of the phylum Zygomakota, are characterized by hyphae with rounded ends called sporangia, which contain spores. Black bread mold is a thread-like fungus. The sac fungi, members of the phylum Ascomycota, are the largest group of fungi. During sexual reproduction, these fungi form a sac called an ascus. Yeasts, mildews, truffles, and morels are all sac fungi.
This means sac. So Ascomycota are those fungi that have sac-like structures. Mycota come from the Latin word mycus. Mycus means fungus.
Fungi are classic fungus. The sac fungi, members of the phylum Asexual reproduction, these fungi form a sac. Yeasts are sac fungi. The common fungus that you put on pizza is a member of the phylum Basidiomycota, or club fungus. During sexual reproduction, they develop special structures called basidia on the underside of their cap. Spores fall from the basidia to the ground and grow into new hyphae. Fungi that do not have a sexual stage are placed in the phylum Deuteromycota, the imperfect fungi. Most cause disease in plants and animals. Penicillin is an imperfect fungi.
If we back to the types of fungi, we will say that firstly we have the Zygomakota. They are forming zygospores during the reproduction. Most moles get their food by decomposing dead or decaying organic matter. However, At least one group of Brit molds gets food through a symbiotic relationship. If we even proceed illustrating the structure of the Zygomakota, we will say that mycorrhizae are fungi that live in a mutualistic relationship with the roots of certain plants. Also, we can see here that here the black is considered the Zygomycota, is considered the Rhizobus nigricans, or the Brit mold. Okay, Rhizobus is species and nigricans is the genus. I'm sorry, Rhizobus is the genus and the nigricans is the species. Nigricans come from the Latin word that means black because it makes a black color. Now we will proceed to the second part, which is the Ascomycota or the sac fungi. These fungi all form a sac structure. Sac means a bag-like structure that contains spores for reproduction. This is the shape of the Ascomycota or the sac fungi. Morels and truffles are multicellular Ascomycotes or Ascomycota or sac fungi. Now we'll go for the Basidiomycota or the club fungi. These fungi have fruiting bodies shaped like clubs. They have reproductive structures that are known as basidia. This group includes mushroom, rusts, and smots, which are two types of fungi that cause disease in plants. This is the structure of an example of the Basidiomycota or club fungi. Eventually, we have the Zygomakota, which are known as imperfecta or primitive fungi. Those primitive fungi are the simplest type of fungi ever and are called the primitive fungi or imperfecta. They are not perfect because they lack of one of the cycles of the life cycle. Most live in water and have spores with flagella that help them to move. So those are the main types of fungi. We have Zygomakota, we have Ascomycota, we have Basidiomycota, and eventually we have Deuteromycota or imperfecta or primitive fungi. So we are back to the explanation, and now we will talk about the life cycles. We will start by the life cycle of Zygomakota. Of course, Zygomakota is not Deuteromycota, it's not imperfect. Why? Because it has two life cycles, asexual and sexual. In the beginning, we will start talking about the asexual reproduction of the Zygomakota.
In zygomycetes, asexual reproduction is more common than sexual reproduction. Specialized hyphae called sporangia produce haploid spores. The sporangia break open and release many spores into the air. Wind and water disperse the spores. If a spore settles in a place that has the correct environmental conditions, it will germinate. The spore will eventually grow into a new zygomycete.
Yes, as we saw here in the illustrated video, we can summarize by saying that the life cycle of Zygomakota, of course, the phylum Zygomakota is a type of free-living terrestrial forms of fungi. The Brit molds reproduce asexually when there is plenty of food, because as we did mention before, the asexual reproduction is favored for the primitive forms of living organisms. And actually, if we are looking for the pros for the asexual reproduction, as we discussed this before, it is not time consuming. Why? Because it's very fast. So in the bacteria before, we did mention that in about 20 minutes bacteria can divide easily, but in comparison with the sexual reproduction, the asexual is very fast. This is one issue, and also there is no need for partner, so that the asexual reproduction can occur more rapidly, and also the asexual reproduction reproduce more numbers in comparison to the sexual reproduction. And also in the asexual reproduction there is no need for having a gamete formation or sex cells. That's why it is not taking a lot of time, so it's considered a faster way of reproduction in comparison to the sexual reproduction. So during the asexual reproduction in zygomacotes, the haploid spores are shed from the tips of the specialized hyphae. They are carried by the wind to new locations where they germinate. If we are looking here for the asexual reproduction, here we have the sporangium. Sporangium is a singular, sporangia is the plural. Inside it there are the spores. The spores, this sporangium will be rupture, and those spores will be spread. If they are fall in the proper conditions or proper media, the spore produces hyphae. Those hyphae are 1N. 1N means it has half chromosome set. It has half chromosome number. And then by mitosis, the spore will divide and will form hyphae that grows above the ground and produce a new aerial structure that will having the sporangium. The sporangia also will have the spores, and the spores will be continue the asexual reproduction cycle. This is the asexual reproduction in the Zygomakota. If we're proceeding talking about the sexual reproduction in the Zygomacote, we can say that
in zygomycetes, sexual reproduction is not as common as asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction in fungi is also called conjugation. There are two types of reproductive hyphae in zygomycetes, the positive mating type and the negative mating type. Conjugation begins when the two different types of hyphae meet and form two chambers containing many haploid nuclei. The haploid nuclei fuse, forming many diploid nuclei, which eventually become zygotes. A specialized cell with a very tough outer layer called a zygosporangium forms around these zygotes. The zygosporangium may remain dormant for several months. When environmental conditions are favorable, zygotes in the zygosporangium undergo meiosis. Sporangia then germinate from the zygosporangium. Haploid spores form within the sporangia and are scattered by the air currents. If a spore lands on an appropriate host, it will germinate and grow into a new zygomycete.
If we're back to the sexual reproduction in the Zygomakota, during the sexual reproduction in the Zygomacote, a zoosporangium forms when the fusion of nuclei from the cells of two different hyphae. As we saw here in the video, we will have two different hyphae. One of them is positive and the other one is negative. They are positive mating hyphae and negative mating hyphae. They all look the same, but they are chemically different. So those will be fused together. So the gametes, which is 1N, that have half chromosome number of different mating types from the form at the tip of the hyphae, they will make a structure that is known as Zygospore. If we are looking for this, as we mentioned, even the zoosporangium forms after the fusion of the two different mating types. When the environmental conditions are favorable, the zygote in the zoosporangium will start to germinate, forming a new sporangia, and then the life cycle will be continued. And as I mentioned, the sexual reproduction is not favored. Why? Because it's time consuming. Why also? Because it takes a lot of time in order to wait for another partner. That's number one, and takes a lot of time for forming gametes. This is number two. Number three, it is slower in comparison to the asexual reproduction. And also, number four, it's the number of offsprings in comparison to the asexual reproduction is relatively lower. And not only this, but also we can say that the sexual reproduction only in the harsh conditions, so that the organism is forced to. Otherwise, in the favorable condition, the organism will favor not consuming a lot of energy in order to do the reproduction process, so that it will go for the asexual reproduction. So if we back to the outline, we can say that here again, there is also one of the most important things. I will share it with you now, which is the sexual reproduction or asexual reproduction first in the Ascomycotes. So how the Ascomycotes reproduce, I will share you my screen here. This is the way by which the Ascomycotes performed. Let's listen together.
In Ascomycetes, or sac fungi, asexual reproduction is more common than sexual reproduction. Specialized hyphae, called conidiophores, produce haploid spores called conidia. Conidia occur in many different sizes and shapes, and they are responsible for the color of many Ascomycetes. Wind and water disperse the conidia. If they settle in an appropriate environment, the conidia germinate, forming new mycelia.
So, as we saw here together, the asexual reproduction in the Ascomycota. So, if we even proceed for the further illustration for the life cycle of Ascomycota, we can go for the sexual reproduction in the Ascomycota, and it goes as you will see now in the interactive video. And pay attention a lot, because it is a little bit complicated, so that we can together illustrate it easier.
In Ascomycetes, or sac fungi, sexual reproduction is less common than asexual reproduction, but still occurs. In fungi, there are two types of hyphae, positive mating types and negative mating types. Sexual reproduction begins when the positive and negative mating types fuse. Haploid nuclei migrate from one mating type hypha to the other. The haploid nuclei from the mating type hyphae pair off but do not fuse. The hyphae then grow into a visible cup-like structure called an ascocarp. Within the ascocarp, some of the paired nuclei fuse and form a diploid zygote. The zygote undergoes meiosis and 4 haploid nuclei are formed. The nuclei in the zygote then undergo mitosis. The result is 8 haploid spores. The ascus releases the spores when they are mature. If a spore lands in a favorable environment, it will germinate, forming a new ascomycete.
This is the sexual reproduction that will be occurred in the Basidiomycota. Mushroom is our example.
In Basidiomycetes, sexual reproduction is typical. It usually involves a club-like reproductive structure called a basidiocarp, or more commonly, a mushroom. The basidiocarp consists of a stalk and a cap. The underside of the cap is lined with gills that radiate out from the stalk like spokes on a wheel. The gills are lined with thousands of basidia, which are cells containing 2 haploid nuclei. In the basidia, the haploid nuclei fuse to form a diploid zygote. The zygotes then undergo meiosis and form basidiospores. Wind and water disperse the basidiospores. If they land in an appropriate environment, they can germinate, forming haploid hyphae. Some hyphae are positive mating types and other hyphae are negative mating types. If a positive mating type encounters a negative mating type, their hyphae may fuse. The fused hyphae grow into mycelium and eventually form a new basidiocarp or mushroom.
Yes, so together we watched how the sexual reproduction occurred in the Basidiomycota. So now, if we share together and summarize this, we can say that here the multicellular fungi have complex reproductive cycles. We have, of course, distinctive reproductive structures. Those are very important in the lesson. Here we have the club fungi or Basidiomycota. reproductive features are the basidia. That's why they are being named Basidiomycota, due to the presence of basidia. Mycota means the kingdom fungi that have basidia. Those are the basidia, or the structure that we just saw in the video. Here we have the brick mold or the Zygomakota. Zygomakota, they are named Zygomakota because they do contain zygospores. Due to the presence of zygospores, so they are being named as Zygomakota, or fungi that do contain zygospores. So they are known as Zygomakota. The reproductive structure is zygospore. That is very important. Also, we have the sac fungi or Ascomycota. While they are known as Ascomycota, due to the presence of asci, asci is plural, singular is ascus. Ascus is a Latin name which means sac. So the sac-like structure, which is known as ascus, all of those are known as asci, as also we saw in the previous video. So those are considered the reproductive features that are present in the Ascomycota. That's why they are named Ascomycota, or the fungi that have reproductive structure in the shape of ascus or asci. So those are very important, that are differentiating the different sort and different types of fungi according to their reproductive structures. Now we can make use of our time and practice a section quiz in order to be sure that we understood properly. So I'll share you the screen here that having the questions. So firstly, I'll say the question and I will hang up for about 10 seconds and waiting for you trying to answer the question from your understanding. Then I will give you the answer. I suppose you probably give me the proper answer from the beginning or from the first intention. Here, number one, the bodies of multicellular fungi are made up of long strands that are known as. Think about the answer. Yes. I hear you saying C, which is Hyphae. That's correct. Question number two, fungi differ from plants because fungi are not A, photosynthetic, B, multicellular, C, diverse, D, eukaryotic. Try to think about the answer. Try to find out the best answer that suited the question. Yes, I can listen you say it is photosynthetic. Why? Because fungi is not like plants, because if we back again, question number three, which of the following structure produces spores during both sexual and asexual reproduction? A. Hyphae, B. Sporangia, C. Basidia, D. Zygospores. That's why I did mention it is very important point. I'll give you 10 seconds to think about the answer and then I will give you the answer. Yes. Now I can hear you saying sporangia. Why? Because the full structure produces spores. The spores are made inside the sporangia, the spore producing case, which is found in the Zygomakota. Yes. So let's go for the question number 4. The part of a fungus that grows above ground, that releases spores and is sometimes edible. The one that we can eat, the one that may put on the crust of the pizza. Okay, the one that you can make a sauce from it, which is A. Hyphae, B. Chitin, C. Mycelium, D. Fruit and body. I'll give you 10 seconds to think about the answer. Yes, I'm listening. Yeah, I'm listening you now saying the fruiting body. The mushroom that we are eating is considered the fruiting body. Question number 5. The mutualistic relationship between fungi and the plant whose roots they live on, whose roots they live on, provide both organisms with what? A. Water, B. Nutrients, C. Shade, D. Spores. Try to think about the answer, and I will give you a couple of minutes, couple of seconds to think about it. Yes, I can listen you now saying it is B, nutrients. Yes, because in this mutualistic relationship, they are sharing the, yes, the nutrients. So now we did finish the illustration of the lesson, and even we solve questions about it.